The kettle sang its soft, lonely whistle just as the morning sun crept through the lace curtains of the small kitchen. Light filtered in at an angle, catching the steam rising from the spout, turning it to gold. Yuki reached for the handle with slow fingers, her joints stiff from the April chill that still lingered in the wooden floorboards. She poured the hot water into a chipped porcelain teacup, her husband's favorite, the one with the blue cranes, and held it between her hands as though cradling something fragile. The scent of roasted green tea drifted up, earthy and familiar. Kumo watched her from the windowsill, his tail curled neatly around his paws. The gray cat's eyes, the color of dried persimmons, followed her every move with quiet vigilance. He had always been attentive, but after Hiroshi died, he had become her shadow, appearing in rooms before she entered them, curling at her feet before she could sit down. Yuki had once joked that the cat had loved Hiroshi more, but lately, it seemed the two of them had come to a mutual understanding. They were what the other had left. The countryside home was smaller than the one they'd shared in the city. The move had been necessary not just financially but spiritually. The Tokyo apartment had felt suffocating without Hiroshi's quiet footsteps, his soft snoring from the other side of the futon. Here, in this sleepy village surrounded by mountains and rice fields, there was still silence, but it was a gentler kind. It gave her space to grieve without being haunted. Every morning was a ritual. Kumo. A slow walk to the edge of the property to check on the sakura tree they'd planted just last year, before Hiroshi's heart had betrayed him. Its blossoms were beginning to open now, cautious, like her. Sometimes she talked to the tree. "Too early," she would whisper. "You'll catch a cold." Other times, she said nothing at all. Her neighbors were kind, if distant. Old women with backs bent like sickles waved to her as they hung laundry. The man who ran the vegetable stand always added an extra daikon when she bought groceries. No one asked too many questions. They simply accepted her as the woman who lived alone in the old Saito house, with the cat that stared at everyone like he was judging them. There were good days, days when she found comfort in routine, folding the same laundry, cooking too much rice, reading old mystery novels on the porch while Kumo sunbathed. Days when the ache in her chest felt manageable, like something she could fold neatly and put away for later. But there were bad days too. Days when the silence wasn't gentle, but loud and echoing. Days when she reached out in the dark, still half asleep, expecting to feel Hiroshi's warmth beside her. When all she found was Kumo, pressed close but too small, too quiet. She never cried in front of the cat. Kumo didn't like the sound. That morning, Yuki stood in front of the calendar tacked to the kitchen wall, fingers brushing the days with absent-minded hesitation. April 19th. She had circled the 21st in red last month, errands in the city. She needed to renew her bank book, get a prescription refilled, pick up a few things she couldn't find in the village shops. It was nothing urgent. That's what she told herself week after week. But now, the red circle stared back at her like a dare. She sighed. Kumo leapt down from the windowsill, landing soundlessly, and padded over to press his head against her ankle. "I suppose it's time," she said, stroking his back. "You'll have to come with me. I don't trust the neighbors to feed you properly." That wasn't the real reason, of course. The truth was, she didn't want to go alone. The idea of boarding a train by herself, even just a short ride to the city, filled her with a kind of dull anxiety. She had done it 1,000 times before, when Hiroshi was alive. They used to take the train together, side by side, sharing quiet thoughts and small snacks. The rhythm of the tracks, the murmur of other passengers. It had all felt safe, somehow. Now, it felt like stepping into a world that had moved on without her. That afternoon, she pulled out Hiroshi's old cat carrier from the storage closet. Kumo sniffed it with disdain. "Oh, come now. It won't be that bad." The carrier still smelled faintly of cedar chips and his cologne, a warm, woodsy scent she had almost forgotten. She let her fingers linger on the handle a moment longer than necessary. Packing was easy. A small satchel, wallet, phone, a faded photograph she always carried with her. Hiroshi, standing in front of the old bathhouse in Kyoto, smiling like he just remembered something funny. She added Kumo's favorite blanket to the carrier, smoothing it out with care. That night, she sat on the futon, Kumo curled against her side, purring softly. She stared out the window as the wind rustled through the plum trees in the distance. "I'm scared," she whispered. Kumo lifted his head, blinked slowly, then pressed his forehead against her cheek. She smiled. The next morning, fog blanketed the village in a pale, silvery hush. Yuki dressed carefully. Pressed slacks, a soft cream sweater Hiroshi had once said made her look like spring. Her hair, now streaked with gray, was pulled back with a tortoiseshell clip. She looked in the mirror and saw someone she almost recognized. Kumo didn't struggle as she placed him in the carrier. He settled in, eyes wide but calm, tail wrapped neatly around his paws. The walk to the station took 20 minutes. She passed the bakery, the shuttered bookstore, the old vending machine that always swallowed your coins. The cherry blossoms along the road had begun to shed, their petals dotting the ground like confetti from a quiet celebration. At the station, the platform was nearly empty. Just an old man with a suitcase and a teenager glued to his phone. The train hadn't arrived yet, but she could hear it in the distance. That low, rumbling promise of movement. Kumo let out a soft meow. "I know," she said. "It's strange without him." The train arrived with a hiss of brakes and the familiar screech of metal. The doors slid open. Yuki stepped forward, her shoes clicking softly against the concrete. She paused for only a second, then boarded, Kumo's carrier in one hand, her satchel in the other. The doors closed behind her. The train began to move. As the village slipped away through the window, framed by the morning fog and the petals falling like snow, Yuki leaned her head against the glass. Kumo meowed again, softly. "I'm not sure where we're going," she said. "But at least we're going together." She looked down at the carrier, at those amber eyes blinking slowly back at her, a heartbeat steadier than her own. For the first time in weeks, Yuki didn't feel entirely lost, just in motion. The city was louder than she remembered. As the train slowed into the platform at Ueno Station, Yuki felt her grip tighten on the cat carrier. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, their cold fluorescent glow bouncing off polished tile and metal signs. The doors opened with a pneumatic sigh, releasing a wave of warm, urban air thick with perfume, coffee, engine exhaust, and movement. So much movement. People streamed in all directions, commuters in dark suits with earbuds jammed in, mothers tugging toddlers behind them, teenagers dragging wheeled suitcases. The station had that relentless heartbeat, pulsing beneath her feet, as though the city itself was exhaling in all directions at once. She stepped off the train with Kumo in one hand and her bag in the other. Her shoulders tightened. The crowd didn't part. No one looked twice. She had lived in Tokyo for over 40 years. But in this moment, she felt like a ghost, drifting upstream through a world that no longer saw her. "Excuse me," she murmured, sidestepping a teenage boy as he veered around her with a game console in hand. "Sumimasen." She kept her eyes fixed ahead, trying to remember the way out. North Gate, elevators on the left. The station hadn't changed much, but the chaos always left her disoriented. Her breathing quickened. She paused to get her bearings, and that's when it happened. A sharp jolt from behind. A woman with a wide shopping bag brushed past too fast, knocking Yuki's shoulder. The strap of the carrier slipped from her hand. It fell against her leg, thudding softly. Kumo hissed. Before Yuki could kneel down, a child, perhaps 5 or 6, darted in front of her. His mother was yelling something in Japanese, but he had already crouched in front of the fallen carrier, curious hands tugging at the latch. "No, wait!" Yuki cried, reaching too late. The carrier door popped open with a faint click. Kumo bolted. Like smoke, he slipped from the opening and darted through the forest of legs. Gray fur disappeared into the chaos, a low blur that vanished under the edge of another train. A sudden collective gasp rose around her. A few people paused, blinking in confusion. One woman muttered, "That cat! Was it loose?" Yuki shoved the carrier aside and scrambled after him, her breath sharp in her chest. She caught sight of his tail vanishing into the open doors of a departing train. "Kumo!" she shouted. Her voice cracked, fragile and desperate, but the doors closed. Her fingers hit the glass just as the train began to move. "Kumo!" A young station attendant glanced up from his post, alarmed by her cries. But it was too late. The train was gone. Panic rose in her throat like floodwater. Her legs nearly gave out as she stumbled back from the platform edge, clutching the empty carrier like a life raft. She tried to breathe, but each inhale came sharp and shallow. Her ears rang. Gone. Kumo was gone. She spun around, eyes wild, seeking help. The crowd blurred. She felt so small, so helpless. A woman alone in a place where no one noticed until something broke. "Help me," she gasped in Japanese. "Please, my cat. He got on that train. He's all I have." The station staff moved quickly now, ushering her toward the information counter. A uniformed man with a clipped haircut nodded rapidly, pulling out a tablet and jotting down train details. "What line?" he asked. "Yamanote," she whispered. "The green one. Going clockwise, I think." He pressed a button and muttered into a handheld radio. "We'll alert the stations ahead. Do you have a picture?" Yuki fumbled in her purse. Her hands shook. She found her phone and opened the gallery. The most recent photo. Kumo curled on the windowsill, eyes half closed, looking like a sleepy god. "This one," she said, her voice thick. "This is him. His name is Kumo." The man nodded again. "We'll do our best. Cats are quick, but station cameras may catch him. Please wait here. Wait." Her knees trembled. How could she wait when he was alone out there? She sank onto a bench beside the information desk, the empty carrier on her lap. The latch still hung loose. Her fingers pressed against it again and again, as if she could reverse time with touch alone. A child giggled somewhere behind her. Laughter in the face of heartbreak. Tears came hot and fast. She didn't care who saw. The train moved like a beast beneath his paws. Kumo crouched low between the legs of a bench near the back of the car. His claws gripped the floor. His breath came in short bursts. Everything smelled wrong. Too many people, too many sounds. He could hear the low hum of electricity, the shuffle of shoes, the hiss of doors opening and closing as the train rolled through stations. None of it made sense. Where was Yuki? He had smelled her fear before the carrier opened, heard the strain in her voice. The world had exploded into noise, feet thudding and people yelling, and instinct had done the rest. Run. Hide. Now he was inside something that moved without wind. The vibrations under his belly felt like a threat, constant and unnatural. And she wasn't here. His ears twitched. Another station. The doors opened. New people stepped on. One sat directly above him, a woman with the sharp scent of fish and hand lotion. She crossed her legs, nearly knocking into his nose. Kumo bolted again. He darted beneath the seats, finding a darker crevice near a trash bin. Heart hammering, he crouched there, breathing fast. He didn't know this world, but somewhere, beyond the wrong smells and sounds, was the scent he needed. Yuki. He just had to find it again. By late afternoon, Yuki had spoken to 3 different train officials, filled out a missing pet report, and visited 2 stations further down the Yamanote line herself. No one had seen him. Her legs ached. Her head throbbed. The city, once a mosaic of memories, now felt alien, heartless in its speed, its indifference. She couldn't bear to return to the village without him. That night, she checked into a capsule hotel. The staff eyed her curiously, but said nothing as she clutched the empty carrier and murmured for a toothbrush. In the tiny capsule, she lay curled like a kama, staring at the blank ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of strangers breathing in neighboring walls. She tried to remember the sound of Kumo's purr, the warmth of his weight against her back. She whispered into the darkness, "Come home." The train stopped at a quieter station as night fell. There were fewer people now. A janitor stepped off with a trash bag, muttering to himself. The air was cooler here, sharper. It smelled faintly of rust and rain. Kumo crept from the shadows and followed the scent of open air. A gap between the doors. A low jump to concrete. Freedom, but not home. Neon lights flickered overhead. This place smelled of diesel and tired feet. No trees. No soft voice. He meowed once, the sound small in the cavern of the platform. No answer. He crouched, invisible in the shadows, waiting. The air outside the station was thick with city smells. Old oil, damp concrete, leftover food, and something electric that made Kumo's whiskers twitch. Beneath it all, a faint, almost imaginary thread lingered, her scent. Yuki. It was like a whisper in the wind, warm rice, wool sweaters, green tea from her breath. It wasn't strong, not enough to follow clearly, but it was there, somewhere. Kumo padded along the station's edge, fur slicked tight from drizzle in the air. The ground was cold. His paw pads stung from the rough surface of the asphalt. There were voices behind fences and flashing lights he didn't understand. But he stayed close to the walls, ducking under benches and around vending machines, quiet as falling ash. People passed within feet of him, their giant shoes thudding like distant thunder. Some glanced down, some didn't notice. A few small children pointed, but their parents tugged them along before Kumo could decide whether to bolt or freeze. He moved like he always had in uncertain territory. In shadows, one ear angled behind him, tail low, eyes sharp. There were no trees here, no wind-swaying grasses or sun-warmed stones. Just concrete, noise, and danger. And yet he moved forward. He passed through alleyways lined with rusting bicycles and trash bins that reeked of vinegar and fish bones. His stomach grumbled. It had been hours since he last ate. The soft-boiled chicken from Yuki's fingers, shared before they left the countryside. Now he could smell food, but it was wrong. Cold, sour, rotten. He pawed open a tipped paper bag and nosed through soggy wrappers. A bit of gristle licked clean. A small, half-eaten rice ball. He devoured what he could, turning his head from the bitter taste. A dog barked suddenly behind a fence. Kumo sprang sideways, landing in a puddle with a splash and disappearing under a dumpster in a heartbeat. His fur bristled. The dog's bark grew distant. Just a warning, not a pursuit. Still, Kumo stayed hidden for a long time, just breathing. When the rain began in earnest, it came like a faucet turned too quickly. Fat drops splattered against the pavement, soaking his fur in minutes. His ears flattened, and he darted under an awning outside a closed convenience store. The shutters were down, but a single light flickered behind them. He curled up on a mat by the door, shivering. Water dripped from his tail, pooling around him. For a moment, he closed his eyes. In the dark, he saw her again, Yuki, humming softly as she poured water into her teapot, her soft slippers shuffling across the wooden floor. He remembered the feel of her lap in the early morning sun, the warmth of her hand on his back, the way she whispered his name, Kumo-chan. He made a low, mournful sound in his throat. She was out there somewhere, and he had to find her. At dawn, the streets grew louder again. Delivery trucks rumbled by, engines huffing. One came too close, spraying a puddle across the sidewalk. Kumo dashed into the alley beside the store, narrowly avoiding a rolling cart filled with crates. Too many wheels, too many legs, too many places to be crushed, forgotten. He found a quieter side street and stayed near the buildings, moving only when no one was watching. On a low fence, a pair of pigeons cooed. He crouched, instincts flaring, but they took off before he could pounce. His limbs ached. His belly was hollow. Still, he walked. By late afternoon, Kumo found himself in a narrow green strip between apartment buildings. There was dirt here, real dirt, and a few overgrown bushes with spider webs tangled in their branches. The scent of other cats clung to the earth. Musky, territorial, sharp. He paused, watched. From beneath a bush, a younger tomcat appeared. Black, with torn ears and eyes like wet stones. They locked gazes. Kumo flattened his body, tail twitching. The tomcat stared, unblinking. Then, as if to say this is mine, the tom hissed and lunged. Kumo backed away with a yowl, slashing the air. They didn't fight, not fully, but the message was clear. No food here. No shelter here. Move on. He did. That night, the cold returned. The rain had left the streets wet and sharp with wind. Kumo crossed a bridge lit with soft orange lamps, his paws tapping faintly on the wet metal grating. Below, cars passed in blurred streaks of red and white. He paused halfway across and looked out at the world. A forest of buildings, towers blinking red at the tips, smoke curling from chimneys in the distance. No grass, no forest, no Yuki. But he would not stop. He climbed down into a neighborhood that smelled older, less sharp, more human. Laundry lines, tatami mats, the scent of rice cookers and bicycles chained to rusting poles. Behind a narrow house with a broken gate, Kumo found a tiny space beneath the porch, dry, dark, warm. A cardboard box lay forgotten beneath a tangle of pipes. He stepped inside. It wasn't her lap. It wasn't home, but it would do. As he curled into the box, tail wrapped around his nose, he closed his eyes. Yuki's voice echoed somewhere in his memory, singing gently, fingers brushing behind his ears. He would find her. He would. The train platform was quieter than yesterday, but it felt no less brutal. Yuki stood frozen near the place where the carrier had tumbled open. Her hands were shaking, clutching the fabric strap of the empty case like it was a lifeline. She had slept no more than an hour the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kumo's terrified face, his small gray body bolting through the crowd. She kept replaying it, the bump, the twist of the latch, the open door, and then gone. Just like that, she'd screamed his name until her voice cracked, until the crowd gave her a wide berth like grief was contagious. The station staff had done their best to help, but there was only so much they could do for a lost cat swallowed by Tokyo's train network. Still, she came back this morning. "Any news?" she asked the attendant at the lost and found, her voice thin from worry. She bowed deeply, hands clasped together. The man gave her a sympathetic look. "We've contacted the stations along the line. No confirmed reports, but we'll notify you immediately if he's found." Yuki nodded. She was trying not to cry again. Not here, not in front of more strangers, but her chest felt like it was caving in. By noon, she was walking the streets near the station, stopping at every convenience store and cafe, asking gently if she could put up a flyer. Most said yes. A few barely looked up. She had printed 10 copies at a coin-operated printer. The photo was an old one, but clear. Kumo curled up on the windowsill in the morning sun. Eyes half-lidded in that sleepy way he looked when he knew he was safe. "Lost cat, please help." Gray domestic short hair. Gentle but shy. Name Kumo. Last seen Tokyo Central Station, Platform 6. She taped them to poles and pinned them to community boards. Each time she posted one, she whispered his name. "Please see this. Please come home." That night, back in the tiny guest house where she was staying in the city, Yuki sat hunched over her laptop. Her fingers trembled slightly as she searched. How to find a lost cat. Lost pet groups Tokyo. Cat escape train. She joined forums. Posted on social media. She created a new blog, something she'd never done before, and called it Where Kumo Went. The first post was short. "My name is Yuki. Yesterday, my cat Kumo was lost at Tokyo Station. He's more than a pet. He was my husband's before he passed. He's the only family I have left. If anyone sees a gray cat, quiet, shy, with white tufts on his chest, please let me know." She attached the photo, then hit publish. For hours, there was nothing. No comments, no likes, just silence and the sound of her tea cooling beside her. Then, around 11 p.m., a comment appeared. "Tea cat lady, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I live near Tokyo Station. I'll keep an eye out and ask my local vet." And a second, a few minutes later, "At Yoshiko 27, I volunteer with a rescue group in the next ward. I'll share this on our network. Don't give up. Cats are survivors. Yuki's breath caught. She pressed her hand to her mouth. The next few days became a blur of motion and waiting. She walked more than she had in months, revisiting parks, back alleys, and even riding the train line where she believed Kumo had traveled. Every night, she updated the blog, recounting the day's search, any leads, any hopes. People began to follow. Some shared tips how to track by scent, how far a cat might roam. Others just offered words. One woman sent her a care package, a packet of green tea and a handwritten note. "Don't lose hope. I once found my cat after 12 days. They remember us." The kindness brought tears, not the despairing ones from before, but something warmer, softer. One morning, while waiting for a flyer to print at a 7-Eleven, Yuki found herself staring at the grainy black and white photo taped to the printer. A missing poster from months ago. A boy's face, still missing. She thought of the weight of not knowing, the ache that never quieted. Her heart ached not just for herself now, but for everyone who had ever waited for someone who might never come back. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the buildings, casting long orange shadows across the tatama floor, Yuki sat in silence. Kumo's empty carrier was by the door. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something folded and worn, a photograph from years ago. Her husband, Haruki, sat on the porch of their old home in Niigata, smiling as he dangled a feather toy. Kumo, just a kitten then, leapt up to swat it midair. His legs were awkward, his ears too big. Haruki's laugh, captured in the photograph, was something she could still hear if she closed her eyes. He had brought Kumo home on a rainy night, just showed up at the door with a soaked cardboard box and said, "Yuki, look what followed me." She hadn't wanted a cat, not at first. But then Kumo had curled up on Haruki's chest as he napped, and Yuki's heart had quietly surrendered. When Haruki got sick, when the color drained from his cheeks and he could no longer walk without help, Kumo never left his side. He slept beside him in bed, curled on his legs. In the hospital, when they allowed pets, Kumo would lie on Haruki's lap and purr so loud the nurses joked it was better than morphine. After Haruki was gone, it had been just the two of them. Now, not even that. That night, as Yuki refreshed her inbox, a new message appeared. Subject: possible sighting, Kumo? Attached was a blurry photo taken from a smartphone. A gray cat crouched near a dumpster in what looked like a quiet back street. The note read, "Hi, I saw your blog. This might not be him, but I saw a gray cat like yours near Kitafushimi Station 2 nights ago. I was feeding a stray. Couldn't get close, but thought you'd want to see." Yuki clicked on the photo and stared. It was low resolution, hard to tell. The posture alert but cautious. The tail tucked low. The small white tuft on the chest. It might be him. It might be. Her heart pounded. Yuki replied immediately. "Thank you. Truly. I'll be there tomorrow morning. Please, if you see him again, let me know anything. Anything at all." She closed the laptop slowly, pressing both palms to its warm surface like it could somehow reach across the city and bring Kumo back. "I'm coming," she whispered. "Just hold on." Kumo didn't know where he was going. He only knew that he had to keep moving. The days bled together: sun, wind, rain, hunger in his belly, a steady ache in his legs, the scent of concrete and unfamiliar dust. Yet, beneath the chaos of the world, there was a pull, something distant and warm that whispered through the air like memory. Yuki. Her voice, soft but steady. Her hands, gentle even when tired. Her lap, where warmth and safety pooled. He followed that feeling. Even if he couldn't place it on a map, his paws kept walking toward it. One evening, just after dusk, Kumo found himself in an industrial alley behind a garage. Oil and iron clung to the air. Muffled music spilled from a small radio set on a crate, and the sound of metal being hammered made his ears twitch. He crouched low beside a rusted bin, his nose catching something sharp and greasy. Grilled meat, faint but real. Inside the garage, a man with thick arms and soot-smudged cheeks glanced toward him. "Well, look who's skulking around," the man muttered. He reached into his lunchbox and tossed out a strip of leftover pork belly. It landed with a soft plop near the bin. Kumo waited. The man didn't move, just went back to fixing something under a scooter, his back hunched with fatigue. Cautiously, Kumo crept out, snatched the meat, and scurried back to cover. It was cold but rich, the best thing he'd eaten in days. The man looked up again, smiling faintly. "You eat like someone who's had better days, too." They shared the quiet for a while. A stray cat and a man who hadn't taken off his wedding ring despite the calendar pages on the wall, yellowed and curled. Kumo stayed the night behind the garage, curled under a crate, belly full. By morning, the man was gone, and so was he. In the next town, the scent of fish drew Kumo to the edge of a small neighborhood school. It was late afternoon. The kids had gone, their voices fading into memory, leaving behind only the breeze and scattered candy wrappers. Kumo ducked behind a vending machine, eyes alert. A pair of shoes stopped nearby, too small to be an adult. He peeked out. A boy, maybe 10, wearing a navy backpack and a frayed uniform vest, crouched slowly to the ground. His hands stayed at his sides. He didn't reach out. He just looked at Kumo, wide-eyed and silent. Then he whispered, "You look like my cat." His name was Sora. He ran away last year. Kumo blinked slowly. The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a small rice ball, wrapped in plastic. "You can have it. Mom says cats like fish." He set it down gently and sat cross-legged beside it, careful not to get too close. "I talk to Sora sometimes," the boy said, his voice just above the wind. "In case he's listening." Kumo sniffed the rice ball, took a small bite. It was soft, salty. The boy didn't touch him. He didn't try to pet him or trap him. He just sat and spoke in fragments about school, how he hated math, how his mom cried at night when she thought he was asleep. Kumo didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone, the weight of longing, the ache of something missing. When the boy's phone buzzed, he stood up, brushing gravel from his knees. "Be safe, okay?" he said, then hesitated. "And if you see Sora, tell him to come home." He ran off, his backpack bouncing with each step. Kumo watched him until he disappeared around the corner. That night, Kumo slept under a bush behind the school, the rice ball wrapped in his dreams. Rain came hard the next evening, cold and relentless, beating against rooftops and soaking everything in its path. Kumo found himself on a quiet street lined with shuttered shops and lanterns left unlit. He darted beneath a bench, soaked to the bone, shivering. That's when the door creaked open. "Come on in, little one," a voice called, old and cracked, like the wooden porch she stood on. Kumo hesitated. The woman didn't move. She simply shuffled back inside, leaving the door ajar. Kumo crept forward, every muscle ready to flee. Inside was a small tatami room, clean but cluttered with faded cushions and a dusty shrine. The air smelled of incense and dried lavender. A folded towel was laid near the heater, a bowl of water, a few sardines still steaming. Kumo didn't understand why, but he stepped in. The woman returned to her chair by the window, knitting something from faded blue yarn. "You remind me of my husband," she chuckled. He had the same serious stare. Never said much either. She didn't pet him, didn't fuss. She simply let him exist. That night, Kumo dozed near the warmth of the heater, safe. The rain drummed on the roof like distant footsteps. At some point, the woman sang softly, an old lullaby that echoed like memory through the stillness. By morning, she folded the towel, refilled the water, and opened the door again. "I know you won't stay. I never do either," she said. Kumo paused at the threshold, looked back once, then left. The road grew quieter. The cities faded behind him, replaced by open fields, rice paddies, and small, sleepy towns. Sometimes he would see children pointing, or hear the hush of someone calling after him, but he never stopped for long. He followed scents, familiar ones, the trace of rain on stone, wind through pine trees, the smell of dried fish from a distant stall. He remembered these, somehow, from the past. He had a path now, no longer aimless. At dusk one day, as the sky turned lavender and gold, Kumo climbed a low hill and paused at the top. There it was, a wooden sign by the roadside, slightly crooked but legible. Yamanote Village, 12 kilometers. His tail twitched. He didn't understand the characters. But the scent in the air, the crispness of mountain wind, the faint perfume of hydrangeas, told him he was closer. Closer to her. To Yuki. The wind rustled the leaves. A truck rumbled in the distance. Somewhere below, a dog barked twice, then fell silent. Kumo stood still, fur slightly damp, ribs visible beneath his coat, but eyes bright with determination. He stepped down the hill, toward the road that led home. The house was quieter than ever. The wind no longer whistled through cracks in the old windows the same way. Even the kettle, which once comforted her with its hissing, seemed to boil with less urgency. Yuki sat at the low table, blinking against the blue light of her laptop screen. Her latest blog post was open, half-finished. A cup of untouched tea sat beside her, growing cold. She titled the post simply, Day 22, Still Looking for Kumo. The living room still smelled faintly of the sardine treats she'd scattered by the doorway that morning, just in case. Old habits died hard. Hope died harder. But then, the ding of a notification. Yuki glanced down. A message. From someone she didn't know. I saw your story on TikTok. My daughter showed it to me. We live in Saitama, and I think I saw your cat by the station last night. Gray with green eyes. Looked lost but calm. Her breath caught. Heart skipping. She clicked the profile. No photo, only a name at M0 Therapcats. Could it be? She clicked over to her blog inbox. 2 new messages. Then 3. Then 7. It had started days earlier with a post on a pet lovers forum, one of her daily updates about Kumo, written like diary entries. He always hated the carrier. My husband used to coax him in with those seaweed crackers he pretended not to like. I should have brought them that day. I should have held the door tighter. A young woman, college-aged by the look of her profile, had messaged her privately. Would it be okay if I turned this into a short video? I study digital storytelling. Your posts, they really touched me. Yuki hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She wasn't the kind to seek attention. But if it helped Kumo come home, she wrote back, yes, please, thank you. 3 days later, the video was everywhere. It was less than 2 minutes long. Soft piano music played in the background. Her blog entries appeared as floating text. The guilt, the quiet grief, the small joys when someone responded with a kind word. Then came the photos of Yuki and Kumo in better days, of flyers taped to poles of the empty carrier. The video cut to footage sent in by strangers. Gray cats wandering train stations, sleeping on cardboard, trotting across rural platforms under the moonlight. At the end, in bold white text, have you seen Kumo? Help him find his way home. Hashtags followed. Hashtag the last train home, hashtag find Kumo, hashtag missing cat journey. Within 48 hours, the video had over 800,000 views. People began leaving out food at stations, posting photos of every gray cat they saw. Some even printed her flyer and handed it out in small towns she'd never even heard of. Yuki watched it all unfold with disbelief. Her quiet, grief-worn story had touched people. It had mattered. Still, every hopeful message came with its shadow. Sorry, it wasn't him. Looked similar but too young. Eyes were yellow, not green. Yuki began keeping a notebook, full of dates, places, and scribbled notes from strangers. She'd mapped out the reports on a printed train route map. Red dots for confirmed false leads. Green for maybes. She circled Kitafushimi Station 3 times. One night, after hours spent replying to comments and uploading clearer photos of Kumo, she stepped outside. The air was cool. Crickets chirped somewhere near the neighbor's vegetable patch. She sat on the porch steps, the blanket around her shoulders tugged tight. The sky above was littered with stars, clearer than any night she remembered. She imagined Kumo somewhere out there beneath the same sky, curled up in a bush, dodging cars, perhaps even stealing scraps from a kind old woman. She smiled faintly at the thought. Then she cried, the kind of soft, silent crying that leaves salt on your lips and damp on your knees. The next morning, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message with a photo. Blurry, tilted. A train station platform, definitely rural. A gray cat, tail raised high, walking along the yellow safety line. The message said, "Saw this guy at Minami Fujimi Station just now. He looked like he knew where he was going." Her breath caught. The eyes were hard to make out. But the gait, the deliberate steps, the way his tail curved at the tip, it was so familiar. She stared at the photo for a long time. Minami Fujimi was only 2 stops from Yamanote, her own countryside town. Her fingers trembled as she circled the town on the map. For the first time in weeks, her hope wasn't just hope. It had direction. She turned to Kumo's empty bed by the heater. For a moment, it felt like he was already on his way. The air smelled different here, thinner, sharper, and yet familiar, like old cedar and the rust of rails in the sun. Kumo padded cautiously along the edge of the tracks, his once silky fur now matted from days of travel. Dirt clung to his coat in patches, and a shallow wound on his hind leg throbbed when he walked too fast. His ribs showed faintly beneath the gray. Hunger had become normal, but something else was stronger now. Something pulling him forward. Each step felt like the echo of a memory. A wind chime from a nearby home jingled as he passed, and he paused. He remembered that sound. Not this exact chime, but something like it, from the porch back at the house. The one Yuki would sit beneath on summer evenings, humming tunelessly while sipping barley tea. His tail flicked. He moved on. He didn't know where home was, but the air itself was whispering it. The ground, the smells. Something in him recognized this stretch of countryside, the loose gravel by the footpath, the scent of pine bark from the row of trees lining the back road. He was close, so close. The sun dipped low behind the hills, casting everything in that deep orange light that made shadows long and soft. The cicadas had grown quiet. Even the birds were beginning to retreat. Kumo trotted up a narrow slope behind a shuttered vegetable stand and paused. From here, the town opened below him like an old memory. He saw it, the train station, familiar tracks glinting in the dusk, the curve of the platform, the vending machines still humming under flickering lights. His ears perked at a faint announcement from the station speakers, warped by distance but known all the same. He began to run. But just as he reached the alley behind the tofu shop, shortcut to the station, a sudden clang of metal startled him. A cage. No, not a cage, a trap. A wire box, lined with newspaper and baited with raw meat. Kumo darted back. Voices. Human. 2 people. One in a uniform. Still haven't caught that gray one. He's clever. Animal control. Kumo's heart thudded in his tiny chest. He crouched low in the shadows, belly to the ground, and waited. Footsteps came closer. The trap door creaked open. Then, a dog barked somewhere down the road. Loud. Close. The officers turned. Damn. Probably the mutts from the old lumber yard again. Kumo didn't wait. He slipped from the shadows and shot through a hole in the fence, heart hammering like thunder. He didn't stop until he reached the back edge of the station. The place was mostly quiet now, the last rush of commuters long gone. A single train idled on the far track, doors open and sighing as if tired. Kumo slinked past the station garden, where weeds now overtook the flowers. The scent hit him hard: earth, lavender, the faint whiff of someone's dropped rice ball. And then, something else. Well, so, the faint, unmistakable trace of her. He turned sharply toward the bench near the far end of the platform. It was empty now, but he knew it. He had lain there once, curled in her lap as she waited for a late train. Her coat had wrapped around them both like a blanket, soft and smelling of comfort. Kumo crept beneath the bench, eyes scanning the dark. The scent was old, faint, but real. He circled once, then again. Then, slowly, with a tired breath, he lowered himself to the cold concrete and curled into a tight ball. His body ached. His leg throbbed. His ears flicked at every rustle of wind. But for the first time in what felt like forever, he rested, waiting. As the night deepened, a soft mist began to roll through the station. The lamplight above flickered once, then held. And under the bench, curled like a question mark in the quiet, Kumo dreamed of warmth, of her voice calling him home. The message had come just past midnight. A gray cat, under the bench by the back platform. Looks like the one in your video. Yuki stared at the screen, her fingers trembling. She read it twice, 3 times. Her throat tightened. She didn't allow herself to hope, not fully, but her body was already moving. The phone slid into her coat pocket. Shoes were pulled on without socks. Kumo's carrier, empty and waiting for far too long, was slung over her shoulder. The streets were silent as she stepped out into the cold. The train screeched against the rails as it slowed at the platform. Yuki stood by the doors, her breath fogging the glass, heart pounding like thunder. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been awake at this hour. The city slept, but her world felt wide awake, pulsing with nerves, with memory, with the faintest flicker of a wish she'd been too afraid to name until now. As the doors slid open, she stepped out into the familiar night air of the countryside station. Everything smelled the same. Dew on concrete, faint train grease, the moss by the garden walls. And yet, everything was different. She walked slowly at first, not daring to run. The platform was nearly empty. A vending machine hummed. A moth fluttered near the light. Yuki moved toward the far end, her hand gripped tight around the carrier strap. Her eyes scanned the shadows. Nothing. Then, she stopped. A shape, small still, curled beneath the far bench, tucked just out of reach of the light. Her breath caught. She couldn't speak. Her legs nearly gave. She knelt, slowly, the way you would approach a dream you're afraid to disturb. "Kumo?" she whispered, her voice cracking. The shape stirred. 2 ears twitched. Then a head lifted, slow, cautious. Glinting eyes met hers through the dark. "Kumo," she said again, louder this time, her voice breaking open with everything she'd held in for weeks. "Kumo, it's me." The cat didn't move. Then one step, then another, and then he ran, right into her arms. Yuki collapsed to her knees on the cold concrete as Kumo buried himself into her chest. He was so thin. His fur was rough and knotted. But he was there, solid and real and trembling against her heart. "Oh my God," she sobbed, holding him tight, her tears falling into his fur. "You came back. You came back to me." Kumo pushed his head under her chin, his small body vibrating with a purr so loud it was like thunder against her skin. Neither moved for a long moment. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was everything. A sound behind her, soft footsteps. Yuki turned. A station attendant stood at a distance, holding a phone. His face was gentle, stunned. A few other passengers had quietly gathered. One of them gasped. "It's them," someone whispered. "From the story. The cat." He found his way back. A young woman raised her phone, recording. But no one pushed in. No one crowded. They just watched, a moment suspended in soft awe. By the time Yuki rose to her feet, cradling Kumo against her, the night felt warmer. The stars looked brighter. She bowed deeply to the small group. "Thank you," she said through her tears. "Thank you all." Someone offered to drive her home. Another gave her a warm tea from the vending machine. She declined the ride. She wanted to walk. Kumo rode quietly in her arms the whole way, his eyes fluttering shut, the wind cool against them both. Home felt like it had been waiting, too. The porch light flickered on as she stepped inside. The tatami mats creaked beneath her feet like an old friend stretching after a nap. She lit the heater, poured warm water for tea, then opened the shoji screen beside her favorite window. She set the carrier down and opened it. Kumo stepped out slowly. He walked the room like he was testing a dream, sniffing the corners, rubbing against the table leg, circling twice before leaping into the window alcove. Yuki joined him, settling into her usual cushion, legs folded beneath her. He curled into her lap without hesitation. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, Yuki exhaled all the way. Outside, the moon hung low and full, casting a silver trail over the rice fields. Inside, a cat and a woman curled close, breathing in sync. The night quieted. Grief didn't vanish, but healing had begun. Together, at last.